So my job is to try to share with you some of the themes that have emerged from our part of the EIRD research agenda. We do the big data part, so which one of these makes it go? Can we get some? Oh, hang on. Okay. So the key themes that have emerged, some of it's contained in this publication, some of you may have seen this. This is freely available, downloadable from our website. But in addition to that, over the last year, 18 months, we've generated about 18 different research briefs to speaking to various topics, and we want to share some of those with you. So this is going to be a gallop through the data. We've tried to give some key messages at the end of each of these sections. What you're seeing here is data that comes from the South Australia Early Childhood Data Project. So that's something we started in 2009. It contains data on every child from 1991 going forward. So that means we've got about 450,000 children that we're looking at here, 18,000 Aboriginal children. We stopped counting at over 30 million records from lots of different government sources, but it's been built as a public good data set, and we're delighted that it can contribute, that we can contribute to this process. And just to echo Minister Sanderson's point, we're uniquely placed in South Australia. We can lead the world in evidence-based approaches to doing better with child protection. Nobody in the world has got one of these, and nobody in the world has the work that Fiona and Leah and Alwyn and Sally and all this other team is doing. I mean that sincerely. I'm not just saying it because it's a good idea. As we travel the world, we are best situated to do this. So we're really looking forward to working with you going forward to come up with a much, much better way to help children with abuse and neglect. You'll see some things in here that echo what Fiona just talked about. And the good thing is, it's exactly the same story when we look at the big population data. That's really valuable to researchers because it's saying, doesn't matter how we look at this, from the richly characterised case file reviews that Fiona's just showed you to our very high level population data, story's the same. Okay, so let's start looking at a whole population view. This is the 1 in 4 number that accompanied the release of the Nyland Royal Commission. And to show you how we got that, if you think about birth cohorts, we've got every birth cohort from 1991 going forward. We follow those cohorts up to age 10, and then we figure out how many children are notified. So in any one birth cohort, about 4,700 children, that's 25%, will receive a notification to child protection by age 10. 19% will be screened in, 10% investigated, 5% substantiated, and just under 2% will experience at least one episode of out-of-home care. This is not unique to South Australia. If you dig around other jurisdictions, it's the same story. If you look overseas, it's the same story. So we're not unique here, it's just that we are ahead of the game in starting to recognise this. So the key message, child maltreatment and child protection system contact is not a rare event, and that's what Fiona was starting the premise. The problem is not unique to South Australia, but we have all underestimated the scope and scale. However we've looked at this, we've underestimated the scale of this problem. So just to put some perspective on that, this is about twice the level of childhood asthma. So the level of child protection contact is twice the level of childhood asthma out there. All right, let's move through. What about child protection contact by age? So if we think about under age 5, nearly 53% of the notifications are under age 5. 55% of the screenings, investigations, substantiations, and 69% of the first experience of out-of-home care is under age 5. So the potential for prevention is high at an early age, but it's going to have to involve collaboration with other agencies who are working with families and young children and infants. Child protection and child development. So this is using the Australian Early Development Census at age 5. So this is the level of vulnerability on one or more domains for children who've never had contact with child protection, 17.7%. That's the level for children in out-of-home care who've experienced out-of-home care, 53%. This is the interesting one. These are children who've only ever had a contact with child protection and nothing more serious. They're more than 2 times the level of children who've never had contact. So the Mars bar response that Fiona talked about, that surely happens, but on average these children are developmentally vulnerable at age 5. These are not false positives. Okay. The overrepresentation of Aboriginal children, I'm going to leave Alwyn to talk to that point, and the data that we use to look at overrepresentation is controlled by the advisory group that Alwyn has set up, so he'll speak to that. Re-notification, we also did some work on re-notification. So if a child is notified under 1 the first time, 40% of those children will experience re-notification 5 or more times. Same story that Fiona saw in her case file reviews. On average, 35% of children who will have a re-notification 5 or more times. The extremes are what Fiona showed, up to 118, something like that. And this is re-notification according to first response by the child protection system. So if it's out-of-home care, if it's substantiation, investigation, screening in or screening out, the rates of re-notification are the same. So multiple re-notifications to child protection are very common, regardless of the initial response by child protection. Re-notification is the same, regardless of the first action by child protection. Out-of-home care. So these are years, all the different colours. This is any out-of-home care. At 0, you'll see 1999 and 2013 there, not much different. At age 3, not much different, and at age 10, not much different. The proportion of children entering care has not substantially changed over time. If we look at guardianship orders from the Minister, at 18, here they are under 1, increased markedly at 3 and at 10. So the story here is the proportion of children experience a GOM18 order has increased over time. So they're becoming more common, with the largest increase for children under 1. We've done a fair bit of work on young maternal age and out-of-home care. So let me first make the point that only 5% of children born to women under 20 experience any out-of-home care by age 5. So the vast majority of children born to young mums are just fine. But if we look at children who are in out-of-home care, then 57.5% of the children in out-of-home care were born to a mother younger than 20 at the time of the first birth. So it's a considerable proportion of the children who end up in out-of-home care. The birth registry data shows 40% of mothers under 20 had a partner under 20 and 80% had a partner under 25. So we are talking about young parents here. But if you look at the perinatal data, by the time the baby is born, 70% of those mums under 20 register no partner. So birth, deaths and marriages chases up partners. That's why they get the data. They go chase that down. That's how we know the age. But by the time of birth, 70% of those young mums are saying, I don't have a partner at the time of the birth. So there's the children who ended up in out-of-home care, 1,180, born to 644 mothers. 67% of those mothers were known to child protection. Fiona reported 66% in her data. It's remarkable how consistent these numbers are. And 23% had experienced out-of-home care. We also looked at domestic violence. This is domestic violence as recorded within the child protection system. So every 100 children up to age 5 who are known to child protection, 30 had at least one indicator of domestic violence. 16 had that indicator at their first notification. Domestic and family violence are clearly implicated in child maltreatment. Our available data sources at the population level underestimate the amount of family violence. Our data sources in this space are incomplete and fragmented. We must do better with that. Risk prediction, some of you will hear a lot. There's a lot of buzz about risk prediction in child protection. There's plenty in the academic literature as well, and there's two things to think about. The first one is predicting contact with child protection before it happens. The second one is about contact with child protection once you're in the system. Most of the academic work is about within the system, doing business differently once contact has occurred. So we've done a fair bit of work around risk prediction, and I can tell you it is feasible. According to medical risk prediction algorithms, this would be used as a clinical tool that would qualify. So it's feasible. So the prevention potential is large. However, we have to consider the cost of the inevitable false positives and false negatives. We will label people as being at risk of child maltreatment, and most of them won't. But you can't know that cost unless you know what you're going to do on the basis of that risk prediction and that screening. There is no general discussion about the cost of false positives and negatives. It only relates to what the intervention would be. And then public housing and child protection. So the children known to Housing SA, 44% were also known to child protection. Of the children known to child protection, 55.7% were also known to Housing SA. 40% of the children who become known to child protection were first known to Housing SA. So it shows that when we link data up, we can get better pictures of contact across different parts of the system. So there's a large overlap between populations being served by public housing and those having contact with child protection. So how should public housing think about its role in child protection? And these are some of the discussions that we need to have about reframing how we work and how we make child protection everybody's business. Thank you.